Hey, bio team. So when biologists talk about transport, they're just talking about how substances move throughout our cells. So there's two types of transport. The first type is passive transport, which occurs when a highly concentrated substance spreads out. And this process happens naturally. Because these particles are naturally moving, they'll bump into each other and lower their concentration naturally. So this process does not require any energy. It happens on its own. The opposite of passive transport would be active transport, which occurs when the substance becomes more highly concentrated. And this process generally requires energy because the substance is naturally trying to spread out in order to make the substance more concentrated. So the type of transport that our cells use depends on the type of particle that they're trying to push in or out of the cell. So in order to transport small nonpolar particles passively, our bodies will use simple diffusion, which is just letting the particles spread out naturally. And in our bodies, one particularly important type of diffusion is osmosis, which occurs when water diffuses through our cell membranes. And so we've got an example of that down here. We've got a high concentration of water on top of our cell, and we've got a low concentration of water inside of our cell. These water molecules will naturally move through the cell membrane, either through these proteins in the membrane called aquaporins, or just directly through the lipid bilayer. So we can watch that happen here. You can see it takes a little bit longer for the water to go through the lipid bilayer, and it's faster for them to go through these water channels. Now, if our cells want to go the opposite direction, that is, push these water molecules back against the concentration gradient, they might have to use something like a contractile vacuole, which you can see here is a vacuole inside of a cell, which when it fills up with water, has the ability to squirt that water back out into the surrounding environment. And this process, of course, uses ATP or energy. Now, if our cell wants to transport slightly larger particles or particles that have charges, our cells can use a process called facilitated diffusion. Which we can see an example of that here. We've got this high concentration of charged particles outside of our membrane and a low concentration of particles inside the membrane. These particles won't be able to make it through the bilayer, so through facilitated diffusion, they'll pass through a transport protein. Now, the opposite of this process is called primary active transport, which is when our cells pump these charged particles against a concentration gradient, from a low concentration to a high concentration. And this process requires ATP, or energy. So we'll watch that happen here. And last, if our cells want to move very large particles, either into or out of the cell, they can use a process called endocytosis or exocytosis, which occurs when a membrane either engulfs a very large particle or discharges a very large particle. And that's it. At this point, you guys have some practice problems. We'll see you next class.